Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Now, I apologize for the late upload. This last weekend saw me fairly busy. I had to fulfill my duties as a dudist priest, and I married two dear friends and fellow gamers. I don't know why they trusted me to get up in front of friends and family and speak and officiate for them at the wedding and sign all the marriage licensing and stuff, but they did, and in the end we all had fun. But we are here to continue on today, and I wanted to pick up on the idea of survival games that I had talked about last time, and I figured it'd be good to provide an example of some of the things I've been talking about, what with all the tips, tricks, and ideas that I threw out there last time around. And of course, nothing would be complete without taking a look at zombie apocalypses. This is a great survival scenario in my mind. Preferably, I like running things like this in D20 Modern or game settings akin to it, but with the zombie apocalypse, you get all the pressures I talked about before that you need to have in a survival styled game. And it's a great way to just, I don't know, I think it's fun. Even though it's been done to death by so many different video game publishers, TV, movies, so many different forms of media that you could ever hope to enjoy have just done the genre to death. But it still holds such a near and dear place in my heart, I know at least. And I've had a great time running these kinds of games for different game tables and different groups. And my friends, for the most part, have sincerely enjoyed these. And I've had some time to refine it and think about it over time. And in particular, I think the folks at Undead Labs with State of Decay, and to a certain extent State of Decay 2, they've done a great job, and I think it makes for a great model to work off of for this kind of a setting. In particular, one of the things I talked about last time that we are going to discuss today is resources. The work on resources has been fantastic. I love the way it's set up in State of Decay, and again, State of Decay 2. And I think it translates really well to tabletop gaming. And now, for those of you that don't know, and even those of you who do, who have played it before, but what you are looking at is food, medicine, materials, ammunition, fuel, and to a lesser extent power. But electrical power is very dependent on the location you have the players in. And we'll get this one out of the way first. If they're next to a river or an area with a hydroelectric dam, like the Hoover Dam, for example, then, if the players can either keep the dam running or get it back to running, even in a minimal capacity, they can supply a portion of power to the city's grid. And, well, by and large, not every place is going to still be functioning. So if the players can tap into that resource, then hey, they have electricity, they can power refrigeration units, they can do so many things that might not otherwise be available to them. But again, that's dependent a lot on what their particular situation is, and that's going to be dependent on the location. So that one is something to keep in mind, but is not always going to be applicable. The other 5, however, certainly will be. First up is food. Now, you'll see here, or have seen on this particular image, that I've got a couple of different categories under each resource. The reason for that is, I think, at least the way I've run it, and will run again in the future, is that different qualities of resources are going to provide different benefits to the players. Fresh food is going to be overall healthier and provide better bonuses. In particular, I like to throw in a bit of a fortitude bonus, because a healthy, hydrated body that's fed on fresh food with all the vitamins and minerals they need is going to be more adept at dealing with different infections that may occur. Not only that, but the body is going to recover from and deal with greater deals of physical stress than one that's undernourished or malnourished. So having it provide a higher bonus, I think, is worthwhile. But at the same time, it's fresh food. It's going to decay faster than the other forms of food will. Preserved foods will last longer, but they're not going to provide as big of a bonus as fresh foods will. And then non-perishable stuff, it'll keep you alive, but it's not necessarily going to be the healthiest. Not all non-perishable foods are created equally. Some are healthier than others, but overall, just as a very general category, I think it's worthwhile. I think it makes sense to have it provide no real bonuses, but it's not going to give you any penalties eating it. Unless your players have come up with a character that's like severe diabetic, and a lot of non-perishable foods tend to be high in their sugar contents. But anyways, also, I've listed water under here just because we're already going to be tracking a lot with these different resources. We need to cut corners and make life easier on ourselves where we can. And lumping water underneath the food category just makes sense to me. For medicines, we have pain meds in light to moderate and severe categories. We have antibiotics and supplies. What do I mean by supplies? Saline drips, EpiPens, things that don't quite fit under a specific, or well, a broad category kind of thing. Smarter people than I, or more knowledgeable people than I, might be able to create a few more categories underneath of this particular resource, but I think just as, again, a very generalized thing, it allows us to add a little bit of diversity to the resources without necessarily having to track every last little thing. Same thing with materials. We have wooden boards, sheet metal, cinder blocks, concrete, wiring, barbed wire, so many different things that could fit underneath this here, but it all goes nice and neatly under the general category of materials. Then we come down to our munitions, our pistol ammo, rifle ammo, and explosives. Certainly we could get a little bit crazier with this if we wanted to, but for what the players are going to be encountering and making use of day to day, I think this is more than sufficient. And then fuel, we have gas, diesel, high octane fuels, and biodiesel. These are going to be particularly important if the characters are running vehicles or generators, electrical generators. Pardon me. But these are what the players are going to use to fuel the different devices that help make life a fair bit easier. Vehicles will, of course, provide a faster way of traveling, as well as a greater capacity for transporting resources and people, but they're also going to generate more noise. They are overall not very quiet machines. Now, they're running like a Prius or some kind of high-end electrical vehicle. Maybe they'll generate a little bit less noise, but overall it's still noisier than just walking and being able to sneak around quietly on your own 2 feet. I guess maybe you could do a bicycle, but that's me starting to overthink things again. So that's where fuel is going to come in handy. Also, making different kinds of explosives or flammable weapons like making different traps or Molotov cocktails. Now, with these resources, I've talked about this a little bit already. Things like the quality of the supplies are going to provide different bonuses. Well-fed bodies that are kept up on with fresh food and water are going to make them healthier and better able to fight off infections, and these different medications will help them fight off infections as well. But the players should be working to gather these supplies. They should view these as valuable, precious resources. I mean, if you think about it, standard game table is going to have 4 to 5 players. Let's just make it a nice round, even 4. So, 4 players, the way I have this all worked out is 1 unit of food will feed 1 person for the day. Now, they're not going to be stuffed, happy, fat, and content off of one ration per day, but they're going to be kept from starving. Their body is going to be relatively properly, generally nourished. So, that's four people are going to consume 4 units. 12 units of food is 3 days of food. So, the players are going to definitely be wanting to try to find ways to keep their supplies and reserves stocked and well maintained and well defended and protected against any kind of loss. Like we talked about before, fresh food is going to decay faster. Now, depending on how good your players are at role-playing, the players may be themselves thinking in terms of survival already and having their players act or their characters act accordingly. But you think about it, most people are not used to having to preserve things. They're not used to thinking about things in long terms of survival, of possibly having to go without. They may not always consider that saving the bag of potato chips for later, say in winter when the fresh food is much less abundant, would be the wise idea. But again, that's just something that'll come about in the process of roleplay. The point and idea being that these resources are precious, and counting these in terms of units just emphasizes that to the players. The players are going to be consuming 1 unit of food per day, keeping themselves properly hydrated and fed. And one other thing you should do in terms of the players stocking up their supplies is preparing a random event deck of cards. And you should include effects that are going to be on their supplies, both good and bad. When these get drawn, largely it's going to be up to you, but also consider doing that when the players are making any sort of a craft check or any kind of anything interacting with their supplies. If they roll a 1, or if they're making a fate check or a luck check and everything comes up in the negative or overwhelmingly positive, they draw from the deck. If they get a bad result on a critical success, discard it, randomly shuffle it back in, have them draw again until they get a good result, and you just keep mixing it up or something. Or make 2 separate decks. You don't have to go crazy and make like 100 cards. Get some note cards, get like 20 good results, 20 bad results, and even set them out separately or together. It's a little bit of extra preparation on your part, but you know what? Adding in this random event element can really go a long way towards making the game feel a bit more tense. It adds that element of the unknown, because not even you can know 100% for sure what the players are going to be drawing, and that can make things exciting, and it again makes a little bit less work for you over the course of gameplay. You can certainly, if you're adept at thinking on your feet, and you can throw different events out there left and right at the drop of a hat, then hey, maybe you don't have to worry about it so much. But I do believe that a little bit of preparation ahead of time will save headaches and keep you from stalling out later on down the line. Another thing you should consider doing is having a map of the area figured out ahead of time, and have a general guideline prepared for what the characters might be finding as they go scrounging for supplies and gear. And for example, if they're scavenging in somebody's house or in an apartment complex, they're not going to be likely to find a stash of assault rifles with plenty of munitions in those places, or finding, like a grenade launcher or a high-end medical suite with all the gear that they could ever hope for. That's going to be pretty uncommon and unlikely. Certainly you can add in different story elements, like if they're in a larger city where there is a criminal element, organized crime and the like. Well, we're already going with a zombie apocalypse. Why not have when the players are scavenging, say they happen upon an apartment complex, and in one of the apartments itself is a high-end medical suite that a street doc maintained in order to patch-up clients that came through that didn't want to answer hard questions at hospitals about how they got this bullet wound. But again, that's a specific example and is something that I think should be woven into story and prepared ahead of time as like one of those little bonuses that you have available for the players. And bear in mind that that place is probably going to have a fair amount of its supplies either ransacked or used already, just because it's a zombie apocalypse. People are going to be flooding towards whatever help they know exists out there, or, you know, wherever they know supplies are hidden at. But again, that's dependent on you and what you want to write out there and have prepared ahead of time. So, with these supplies, one other thing I should mention is you want to have these supplies provide some kind of a tangible benefit for the players. For example, building materials, anything that they could use to construct fortifications or make different facilities at their home base. Those different facilities and reinforcements will require that they use a certain number of units, which again, probably think about ahead of time, but we'll cover that in a later video. But say they are constructing something. Say they're constructing a latrine and there's a specific part they need. They need some kind of a pump. They've already got the generator. They've got toilet seat and everything, and they've got a little trench dug. Now they just need a pump to make sure that everything is flowing out, down into the trench and out from their base to maintain cleanliness and health standards, to keep everybody from getting sick with all that nastiness building up. They can roll against what resources they have available. See if they have a specific part in play that you've decided they need. Say they have 50 units overall, and the pump is actually fairly common. It's going to provide a 10% bonus that they might actually have it. So, if we count each unit out of that 50 as a 1%, with the bonus that you provide them on the pump being common, that gives them a 60% chance on a D100 roll that they will have the pump on hand in their supplies. So if they roll a 1 through 60, boom, they don't have to go out scavenging and putting themselves at risk. You decrease their. What I do is I decrease the number of units they have available by 1 for using their resource in that way, or 2 or 3, however much you decide is going to be fair. It puts the players in a position where they have to think about this a little bit and consider their options. Because on the one hand, they could preserve their numbers of supplies easily and go out and start scavenging. But by going out and scavenging, they risk running into different zombies. They risk running into different groups of survivors. And maybe the survivors are hostile, maybe they want to trade, or maybe they're after the same pump and then the players have to negotiate. Any number of things can happen by deciding they need to build this latrine and deciding they don't want to use the resources at home and go out to scavenge this part. So it adds in, again, another element of tension. Do they use these supplies that they've been carefully building up? Or do they go out and try to scavenge the specific thing that they need? This builds in an element of tension and adventure building just by introducing this particular mechanic. It creates less work for you because all you have to do is decide, hey, they want to build this thing. They need a specific part. Let's roll to see if they have the part. Or they can go out and find it. That's all you have to do, and you create an adventure right then and there in that moment. And it creates that moment of decision for the players, and it empowers the players because they feel like they have more control over how the game goes, because they can expend their resources, or they can go out and hunt. And you can do this with any number of these other resources. The general antibiotics they have for a player who's come down with an infection isn't working. They need something more targeted. More targeted antibiotics tend to be a little bit more rare just because they're more specialized, because the diseases they're designed to work against typically aren't as common. So it's an uncommon to rare kind of antibiotic. It's going to provide say, let's just keep it even numbers, a minus 10% chance to their roll, and they only have 35 units of medicine on hand. So they only have a 25% chance of carrying the specific antibiotic they need for the player or NPC that's come down sick. And again, it's the players, do they roll the dice? Well, in this case, they may as well. But if they can't find it, then they need to go out and scavenge for it. And when they're going out hunting for this stuff, as a general rule, just because it is, in this case, the antibiotics, the medicine, these various resources are the rewards that the players get, generally I say put them out there. Just because it can be disappointing to be repeatedly going out scavenging and coming up with nothing. Certainly that can be realistic, and if everybody agrees that a more realistic approach is what they want to do, then hey, more power to you. But as a general rule, repeatedly disappointing your players by saying, well, this is a rare item, let's see what the chances are of you actually getting it are, is going to be disappointing, especially if they've been going through a lot of intense combat encounters and have been spending other resources to get this specific item that they need to see their goals to fruition, to a successful end. So as a general rule, again, please consider just, if they make it to the spot, they scavenge, maybe they don't find it on the first couple of tries, but by the third or fourth time, fifth time that they go rummaging through, through a hospital, they're going through the hospital's pharmacy in their section that's definitely under lock and key, consider letting them have that. And you know what? Give them a little bit more. Say the place hasn't been entirely looted, or they found a cabinet that was much more secured, and hey, they killed the zombie that had the keys or the key card or whatever to get into it. Give them a little bit extra in that case, because they would have, if you think about it, a hospital is going to be horribly infested, but that'll be a story for another time. Next time we'll be taking a look at encounters, the different kinds of zombies that you can and should be throwing at your players to keep things interesting, dealing with raiders, other looters, other survivors, people that present moral dilemmas for your players. All this next time here on the Gamers Den. But if you like today's video, well then hell, why not let me know and go down there below and click the like button for me. And hell, if you have your own thoughts and ideas, comment down below, please. I would love to hear them. It's always worthwhile to add to the discussion. And even if you didn't like it, still, tell me what you didn't like. Tell me why you disagree with me. Throw down your ideas down there even still. And click the dislike button too. But if you've been enjoying the content overall, why not consider subscribing? We can always use more people here at the Gamers Den. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. You folks have yourselves a good night.